because I look at valuation completely differently to the rest of the world. But that's just me.
Tell me about it. How do you think about valuation? What's your criteria?
Yeah, and I think you and I had a great conversation about this when I interviewed you on my podcast. So most of the other people that I see in the market, they only look at valuation from the perspective of numbers, right? So they'll look at the profitability of the business. They'll recast that profitability because every business has got two numbers, right? It's got the tax numbers and it's got the real numbers. So there's always a recasting process. The technical term for that is called add backs, right? And then you've also got, take backs as well. But you're really normalizing the profitability to affect what would be true in the change of ownership. And that's generally what most people only look at. But there's three other legs of the chair that most buyers and sellers don't really think about. The first one is deal structure. So remember I talked at the start that, if you're buying a company, if you're paying all the money at closing, or most of it at closing, that's got a lower valuation than if you're doing a creative deal where you're going to pay for the business over a long period of time. So if you let's say you wanted to go and buy a Tesla and you rocked up to Tesla and you wanted to buy it there and then for cash, it would cost you $60,000. If you wanted to finance that car over 7 years, you'd probably end up paying about $100,000. So if you're paying for something over a period of time, and in our case, we're using the cash flow of the business to pay the seller, you're going to have to pay a lot more money to buy the business, right? So deal structure has an impact on valuation. The third point of valuation is seller psychology. So if you're a highly motivated seller that wants to sell that company very quickly, you're probably going to have a lower valuation in your mind than a seller that's not motivated, because I have this saying, every business is for sale. It's just a question of how much. So take my pride and joy Dealmaker World Society. So it's an 8-figure business with 25% margin. So it's a great business. That business is not for sale. It's my legacy. It's everything I do. But if you called me up and said, hey, I'll give you $1 billion for your company, I'm going to sell it, right? So every business is for sale. It's just a question of price and terms. So motivation to sell has a big bearing really on someone's valuation. You could have two companies that are identical financially, same product, same everything. The only difference is the owner and the owner's motivation. You could have one seller that is not motivated, having a lot of fun, one seller that's distressed. They're old, they're tired, they're sick, they could be dying, unfortunately. They've run out of ideas. There's a completely different valuation going on in the mind of the seller. And a lot of people don't figure that out. And then the fourth piece of valuation, which for me is the biggest thing, is what I call transfer of value, right? You can have a business that's wildly profitable, that's worthless. It's worth liquidation value because you can't transfer that value to a new owner. And the way I vet these businesses that I buy is, I'll do the financial valuation first. So let's take that $5 million deal that we looked at, doing $1 million a year in profit. We buy it for a 5x multiple. So it's a $5 million deal. But then let's say it's in professional services, so it doesn't have a lot of assets. The book value of that business might only be $1 million. So when you buy that business, you're paying $4 million extra, which we call goodwill, right? So what I do when I'm vetting a deal is I take the goodwill and I say, well, where does that goodwill come from? Well, I break it into 4 pillars. I call it human capital, so the quality of the employees and the people in the business. Customer capital, what's the diversification of the customer base? Do they have recurring revenue, long-term contracts? I look at structural capital. So do they have systems, processes, KPIs for the business? Is the owner working in the business or are they working on the business? And then the fourth one is social capital. So what's the internal culture of the organization? And then what's the external brand and reputation and credibility and differentiation in the market. So that's how I vet a deal. And then I can calculate what I think the valuation is based on how effective I can transfer that value. So two extremes. Let's say you've got a business that's got 1,000 customers. They're all on recurring revenue contracts. They're all locked in. You've got a business owner that doesn't work in the business. He's got a C-suite, middle management layer. You've got wonderful employees. You've got great systems, processes, KPIs. You've got a fantastic internal culture, and the market loves this business, right? That business would be what I call best in class. And I would pay a higher multiple for that business because my ability to extract that value and grow that value is high. Whereas on the other hand, and I'll tell you the story, I was looking at a business that works in the aerospace industry. And this was a really big business, John. This was doing $25 million in top line revenue, and it was making $3.5 million in profit consistently. Great business. So I went to look at the business and did my vetting and looked at all the numbers. And the owner said, so Carl, let's talk valuation. What do you think my business is worth? He said, but let me tell you what my CPA has told me. My CPA's looked at the books and said, hey, you're doing 3.5 million consistently in EBITDA, which is one of the profit measures that we use. He's been online. He's looked at deal stats and PitchBook. These businesses are typically selling for about an 8 times multiple of that size in this market. So with a little bit of the surplus cash that I've got in the business, he thinks it's worth $26 to $27 million. I said, okay. He said, Carl, how much do you think the business is worth? I said, nothing. 0. It's worth liquidation value only. And he almost punched me in the mouth, right? He's like, what do you mean? Like, I've got all this EBITDA. I said, I know. But how many customers have you got? He said, 1. I said, I know. Who owns that business? Your customer. My brother-in-law. I said, okay. Do you have a contract in place for that relationship? No, I don't. Okay. And then I just found out that your brother-in-law's large company, that's your number 1 customer, your only customer, he's about to be sold to private equity in a really, really large deal. So imagine I buy your company for $26 million, and then all of a sudden I'm a new owner with a new customer, and PE are going to look to the market and probably shop around for better pricing, right? This company made window frames for the Airbus. So on an Airbus, you've got aluminium window frames. This company made them, right? So, and the brother-in-law's company was just one in a big long chain of suppliers in that supply chain. So I said to him, like, your business has no value because there's so much risk around that one contract. I said, if you had 100 customers, it would be a very, very different conversation. And again, he was the business. Even though it was a great, huge business, he was doing all the work. He was doing we didn't have to do any selling because his brother-in-law owned the customer. So that's an extreme example.
So what happened in that example?
Sorry?
What happened?
Well, what happened? I don't know. I said, hey, I can't buy this company because of all these different reasons. And then he said, well, what about an earnout? I said, well, and an earnout, as you know, is you're paying for the business over time on contingent payments based on financial performance. I said, sure, but think about it, right? Think about it. If you lose that customer, your business is dead because you don't have any income to pay for your employees, your rent, anything, all the administrative costs in your business. This business had a $21.5 million cost base. So who's going to pay that money if you lose your only one customer? So I actually said to him, look, you've got to, you're in a risky spot. You're in a very, very difficult position. I would go and lock in a contract now before the business is sold and have your brother-in-law disclose that as part of due diligence if that's what he's going to do. But you need to go out there pretty quickly and diversify your customer base. Otherwise, no one's going to buy your business for anywhere near the valuation that you've got. And then what happened is when I talk to a lot of sellers, when I do my vetting, I come up with my valuation. And then the seller always has what I call their heart valuation. And it's interesting, right? And I feel a lot of times for retiring baby boomers that they need to sell their company for a certain amount of money so that they can retire, right? But they've never done any of that financial planning. They don't know their wealth gap. You know, I met a business owner about 3 weeks ago, owned a big, multi-industry marketing agency, big business. And he said, if I don't get $10 million for this business, I'm not going to be able to retire, because my wealth manager said to me, it's called the rule of 4. You're going to make a 4% annual yield on your on your value of your portfolio, and 95% of this seller's net worth was tied up in the value of his business, right? So he said, I need $400,000 a year pre-tax to live my life and not have to change my lifestyle. So I need 10 million bucks in my portfolio, then I'll make my $400,000 a year. And his business was worth about $3 million, right? So I said, and he was a pretty young guy. He was like 47. I said, look, you've got time to get to $10 million, right? You don't have best-in-class margins. You don't have best-in-class transfer of value. There's a process you can go through to make your business a lot more optimized. That's A, going to help you grow your top line. B, it's going to help you grow your profit margin. And C, your business will then trade at the higher end of the range of multiples for your industry. So you're getting like a triple compounding of value.